All right, so I think we're just going to go for it. This is classic Thanksgiving week. It has a way of doing this. That being said, I am going to modify a little bit, and I'll put an announcement up in Canvas so that you guys know what's happening. Because this is Thanksgiving week, and I suspect that the turnout on Wednesday will be even less than what it will be today, which you can see obviously is pretty weak. I'm going to pre-record Wednesday's lecture. And I'll post that today, and that gives you a little bit more time to work through it and watch it at your schedule. So that'll be up on the website today. And then with regards to check-in this week, obviously, I'll be here today and I'll be around on Wednesday as well. But I'm going to make it not mandatory. So you don't have to come in to check in. It's only if you need help. On Wednesday, I will be available on Zoom from 9 to 10:50. That's kind of the usual time frame for check-ins. I don't know how my internet connection is going to be. It may be a little spotty, but we'll do the best we can. The other thing that I'm going to offer to everybody is, as we're approaching the final, if you would like me to review your portfolio, what I like to do for a portfolio review, and what I've typically done in the past, and I think it's very successful, is if you email me a PDF, I'll take it on my iPad and I'll use a pen and I'll write notes all over it and do basically a red line drawing on top of your portfolio. And then I'll email it back to you, and that'll give you direct feedback on your portfolio. I found that it works really well as the portfolios start to develop, because I can quickly talk about moving things and what have you that way. So I will look for emails from you throughout this week, maybe over the weekend, with drafts of your portfolios, and I'll get those looked at and turned back around so that you can kind of get feedback on it. We'll resume our regular schedule next week, so everything will be normal for next week. We'll have our check-ins mandatory next week, and that's also the last full week of class. So no surprise, it's going quickly. So just to recap that, Wednesday's lecture will be pre-recorded and posted today so that you guys can watch it in advance. We won't try to do a live lecture on Wednesday. I suspect most people won't show up that day anyway. So that gives some flexibility, for travel plans and what have you. I will be available for optional check-ins both today from 9 to 10:50 and on Wednesday from 9 to 10:50. Again, those Wednesday ones are optional should you want to. The other thing that I'm inviting anybody to do in recap is to email me a draft of their portfolio. I'll go through it with red lines, and I'll make circles and notes and that sort of thing. So I'll give you that feedback. If you want to email it to me, I'll do that. So all of that will get posted on the announcements at Canvas, just as kind of a recap. But I wanted to go through it verbally with those of you that are here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, and we'll start talking about what it is that we're doing today. So let me get organized here. Oh, come on. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so what we're doing today, and like I said, we don't have that many days left in class, so we have to kind of push our way through it. This is exercise 125. We're going to be doing elevation views from SketchUp. And so I'm going to walk you through the process of creating the elevation views and kind of doing the collage work that's necessary to make a nice elevation view. This does double up with your assignment 106. So if you work on it today, it'll also count towards your assignment 106. For assignment 106, you're going to pick your two favorites. We're going to do an elevation view, we're going to do a section view, and we're going to do a perspective view. You'll pick your two favorites of those three and turn them in for your assignment 106. So let's talk through the exercise 125 here. I do have a tutorial written out that you can view. Oops, I didn't log in. But it has a video that'll walk you through step by step in case you get a little bit lost with what I'm doing. But of course, I'm going to record this lecture and show it anyway. So let's go ahead, and first thing I'm going to do is open up my assignment 106 SketchUp file. Maybe not. There we go. Perfect. And let me switch into a perspective view just so we can kind of see my drawing here, or my model. So this is the model. You guys have seen this house before. This was the one that I brought in and worked on last class. And what we want to do is we want to set up an elevation view. You're only doing one elevation view today, but the key on the elevation view is even if we were to align this like this, you can see that this is still in perspective. So we can still see that little diagonal line there. And it's not really an elevation view, nor is, for example, this view an elevation view. So in order to get an elevation view, we need to switch our essentially out of perspective. And the easiest strategy to do that is to go up to our camera menu item right here and go up to standard views and to start with one of the side views. So let's look at the front, for example. Well, that's not the one I want. So let's go back to standard views. Let's go to the back. Looks like that's how I have it oriented. So that's good, but it's still in that perspective. So now let's go up to the camera here. And instead of choosing perspective, we're going to choose parallel projection. And when we do that, we see that that perspective goes away. And that's what we want. This is fundamentally an elevation view. Now, do I have other elevation views? Absolutely. Are they complete? No. So if I went, for example, to the front view, that's less than exciting. Could I work with this? Sure, if I had to, but I don't want to. So pick the view that looks the best to you. For me, it happens to be the back view. That's the most complete. And that's the one I'm going to work with. If you're working through this, do something similar. Pick the view that's most complete. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in on the view a little bit, just so that we can see more of the elevation. So maybe right about like that. Now that I have the view showing here, it's nice to be able to save this so I can come back to it at a later time. So we do this in Rhino all the time, but I'm going to do this, oops, sorry, wrong tray here. But we're going to do this in SketchUp as well. I'm going to expand the little tray for scenes. And if you don't have this tray showing up, you can go into Window, and I think under Default Tray, you can make sure that it's showing there as well. There, Scenes is checked. So if you're not missing it, or if you are missing it, you can get it. I already have a bunch of saved scenes here, but this is a new saved scene. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus sign right here. It's going to add a scene. It's called Scene 7 right now. And I'm going to go ahead and rename that scene. Let me scroll down here a little bit. And usually it gives me some properties. And go ahead and double click on it, see if I can rename it. You right click, rename scene. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this Fall of 2022, and we'll call this Elevation. Oops. There we go. And so that's going to save my scene. Now, notice that it says property to save, camera location, top level, hidden geometry, hidden objects, blah, 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 blah. The only thing we don't really care about it saving is the style, because we're going to be modifying that. We can also uncheck the axes location because we don't need those saved. Okay, so that now has that. The advantage here is that if I were to go back to a perspective view, for example, right, and I were to orbit around my object and look at it, I can come back to that fall elevation just by double clicking on it, and it's going to drop me right back into that view. And this is good because if we make a change, we can go back and repeat the process and fix it and get this view again. So now that I have this view set up, it's a matter of exporting this into a place that we can then do some collage work on it. And we're going to be doing our primary collage work today in Photoshop. So all I need to do is export JPEGs of this. So this is just the basic lines drawing. I'm going to go ahead and start by exporting this one. I'll go to File and then Export, and we'll choose 2D Graphic. So File, Export, 2D Graphic. We're going to save it as a JPEG image, but I want to make sure it goes on my OneDrive here.
Ask you something while you're doing that.
Sure.
When you're creating the scene, is it getting updated live or is it a snapshot?
So if I were to make a change to the model and I go back to that scene, it will show the updated change.
Okay.
So all that we're saving is the view itself. So
okay.
I could add something on top of my building and it would just come back to this view and it would then reflect it. So it's not static in time. It's just the view is the saved part. Did that help clarify?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Okay.
So I'm going to call this A106 and I'm going to call it elevation. And I'm going to call it dash lines. And this is again for my own organizational strategy. And I'm going to look at the options here before I click on the export. And this is actually really important because by default, it's going to show us or export the view size, which as we can see is only about 1,000 pixels tall, 2,000 pixels wide, which is really, really small. If you look at and want to create this on a poster or something that's going to go up on the wall, you want to think about what size this should be based on how big it's going to end up being on a wall. So for example, if you wanted it to be 10 inches on a wall, let's say the width was going to be 10 inches, which isn't very big. Let's say that's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, but I'm using 10 inches because it's a nice round number. We would print it out at 300 pixels per inch or 300 dots per inch. So we'd be looking at about 3,000 pixels in width if we wanted it to be on the wall at 10 inches. If we wanted it to be on the wall at 20 inches, for example, at 300 pixels per inch, we'd be up at the 6,000 range. So when we're doing these exports, you want to think about how big you might want to make it. So I'm going to call it 6,000 for right now. So right here in my, I'm going to uncheck the view size and I'm going to change this to 6,000. And you see that the height also updates. So that's good. So we're having it at 6,000 and we're going to use our better quality all the way to the slider. The max you can put in here, I believe, is 10,000 or 9,999. I think that's the max SketchUp will export. So I'm going to use 6,000 for right now. That's enough. And we'll go ahead and say, okay. And then we'll click on export. And that exports just my basic lines version. Now, some of you have probably experimented enough with SketchUp to note that there are different styles that are available for us as well. The line version that I'm showing is the hidden line style. Now you may have, and I just realized you may have not been in this style. You may have been looking at something that looked like that to start with. And there's nothing wrong with something that looks like this or one of these other ones, but we wanted to get it into the lines only version. So in order to do that, I go to the default styles and I choose the hidden line style, and that's just our white lines. Likewise, if we go into our, I think it's under assorted styles. No. You could go into straight lines here and use one of those. I don't like those as much. I really like the hidden line style. I think that's the best one. But once I'm on that, I want to make sure I turn off all these extra lines. So I'd go into view and I'd turn off the axes, the guides, so that I end up with just this line. That was the original export, and I should have gone through the process of getting it set up that way. Now, sometimes you do actually like the colored version. So I could pick something like this and again, turn off the section cuts, the section fill, the axes, and the guides. Like that. And then this one is just kind of a colored version. So let's go ahead and export that. I'll go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And instead of calling this one lines, we'll call this one color. Oops. Under our options here, we're going to make sure it's still set at 6,000, which it is. And then we'll go ahead and export it. It's important that we haven't moved the scene at all. So we're getting the exact same view exported and the pixels match up. So we're still at 6,000. Okay, so let's look at some of the other styles. I'm going to go back to that hidden line style. And this time I'm going to turn on the shadows. So I've gone to hidden lines and I'm going to go up to view and I'm going to turn on shadows. And then over here in the shadow section, I'm going to swing the time of day and time of year until I get a shadow. Now, in this scenario, I don't get the best shadows because I'm on the face of the building. That's not going to give me the best shadows, but maybe something like that might give me a little bit. There we go. Now I'm starting to get a shadow on the building. So maybe somewhere in there. Obviously, you can pick a day and a time. Let's do that. Okay. You can pick a date and a particular time, and that's going to create the shadow for you. Once again, I'm going to go to, yep.
Did you geolocate this?
I did not geolocate this. So we can geolocate it. For the scope of what we're doing in this class, we don't need to. If we did, we'd go to File, Geolocation, and Add Location, and it would then give us our bit of terrain, and we could set this on that piece of terrain. So if you want to do that, this is assuming just a generic date and time. But if you wanted to do it, I can certainly help you walk through that part of the process. Okay, we can do that during check-in. But it's a little bit beyond the scope of what we need to do right now. All right, so now that I have the shadows here, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see all of my building lines. So I'm going to go back into my styles here, and I'm going to go to Edit. And when I'm in Edit, I can actually turn off the edges. So it's right there under Edit. It's the first little edge settings, and I can uncheck the edges, and that gives me just the shadows. And this is a very powerful export to have because it's only the shadows in my building. I can then go back to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And so this one would be called Shadows. And then we'll go ahead and export it. Let's turn those edges back on. We can also come over here into our face settings, and we could choose to do an X-ray mode. You can see a little bit of my door in the X-ray mode. The truth is that in this view, there's not a whole lot to see in X-ray mode. So it is one of the options, one of the things that I mentioned in the tutorial that I walked through. But I don't think in my case, X-ray gives me anything. So I'm not going to end up doing the X-ray mode. Let's go ahead and turn back off those shadows. I'm going to go into my view, and I'm going to uncheck shadows. And then let's look at some of the other styles. So we worked with that hidden line style. There are some other ones like these sketchy edges that can sometimes provide a nice kind of look. Sometimes they're a little bit too much. Let's see if we can do it. Like something like that is probably a little bit too much. They have different, dry erase markers and whatever. I've actually found a lot of luck in the past with this airbrush with endpoints. It doesn't look the best here, but in the export, it sometimes looks really, really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that airbrush with endpoints. And once again, I'll go up to view, and I'm going to turn off the section planes, the section cuts, the section fill, and the guides. So I have just the airbrush with the endpoints. And from here, I'll go ahead and export it again. So I'll go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And we'll call this one Airbrush. And we'll go ahead and export that. And the last one that I've had good success with is the pen gray, which is this one. It's a little bit lighter. There is a pen black, I think. There's pen black. It's just a little bit darker. I like the pen gray. But again, it's just a matter of preference. I'm going to go ahead and go to view, and then we're going to uncheck the section planes, the section cuts, the section fills, and the guides. And this is a little bit more casual, and we'll go ahead and go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. If you want to experiment with any of the other options, this is the pen, you can absolutely export any of the other options here. So if you liked, for example, some of, let's see here, they have some of these. Let's say you like that. We could export this as well. I'll go to File and then Export and then 2D Graphic. And this one was called Scribble. So I set up the pen, the airbrush, the shadows, the basic lines. I set all of those up for you to do some of the export. Oh, before I did that, I should have turned off the section planes, section cuts, and the guides. Let's do that export again. So I've set up those 4 as kind of the base that you need. But if you want to go in and do more, there's no harm in doing more of these exports because you can layer them up and see what it turns out like and what it looks like for you when you start to put them together in Photoshop. So I've done the exports. Now let's jump over into Photoshop and start to collage these pieces together. So I'm going to go up to the Adobe folder here, and we'll open up the Photoshop 2022. And one of the important things to consider when we're looking at this is that this is not a scale drawing. This is a representation of what one of our elevations would look like. If we wanted it to be a scale drawing, we'd have to do some scaling of it when we went to print it, say in InDesign. So this is a little bit different than when we took AutoCAD into Illustrator and we did the collage work. There we were preserving scale. Here we're just creating an image of our elevation view. So I'm going to go ahead and open the first one. So I'll go to open. And let's go into my folder here. That was not the correct folder. Sorry about that. All right. And so here were all of mine. I'm going to go ahead and click on the elevation lines. And we'll go ahead and open that. And there's that base lines layer. So this is currently a background layer. Remember, in Photoshop, when we open a file, it always comes in as a locked layer. I'm going to go ahead and right click on it and say layer from background. There we go. And we'll call this lines. I'll say OK. Then I'm going to bring in all the rest of the elevation views. And I'll do that by going to File and then Place. And we'll use a place embedded for this. And we'll pick the next one. So there's the lines. Let's do the shadows. And I'll place. And the advantage here is that they all line up when I bring them in. That's why the export process was so important. Let's bring in the next one. I'll go to File and then Place Embedded. And there it is. We'll confirm. And then we'll go to File and then Place Embedded. And we'll drop the color one in. We'll confirm. We'll go to File, Place Embedded. We did the pen. We need the, oh no, we need the pen. There we go. And we'll go to File, Place Embedded. And the last one was that scribble. And we'll confirm. Notice that the lines do look a little bit different in Photoshop than they do in SketchUp. This was the scribble in SketchUp. And then when we jump over into Photoshop, it looks slightly different. Now, if we were to zoom in, we can see that there still are some scribbles to it, but it's not quite the same. So I have all of those put in. And if you remember back, we had a strategy for how these things start to layer up. So what I would do is I would take this elevation shadows and I would switch the blending mode. This is way back to 105. It's all coming full circle. And I would use the multiply blending mode. I can find it right there. And that's going to make this shadows transparent such that we can see our lines behind. Then we could turn on the airbrush and we will again switch the blending mode into multiply. If I can see it. There it is right there. Then we could turn on the color and we could switch the color to multiply as well. The color I'm not going to end up leaving on. Really, the color is just about selections, but we can go ahead and switch it to multiply just so we can see through it right now. And then I'll go ahead and turn it off. Let me turn on the pen and we'll switch that one into multiply. There we go. And then this last one, which is scribble, we'll go ahead and turn that one into multiply as well. So our end result here in Photoshop looks a lot different than what we could have gotten out of SketchUp just by layering these up. There's a certain depth and density to it that we wouldn't otherwise have, which I think ends up being nice. The other thing is we have the ability to adjust. If the shadows are too dark right now, we can easily change the opacity down on those shadows and make them lighter if we want more of our building to appear. So we've got a lot of flexibility in terms of how these start to come together and make our final building elevation. So now we've got our building elevation in here. We need to concentrate on creating some ground. And this is kind of a critical component to a building elevation, is we need to know where that ground would be. So I'm going to create that ground on a new layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on layer right here, and I'm going to rename that layer to be ground. And so to start to establish that ground, I'm going to make a selection, and I'll use this lasso tool to make the selection. The advantage of the lasso tool is I have the flexibility to actually draw what the ground would look like. So I'm going to go ahead and do that along the length of my drawing. I want to make sure, I'm going to press Control minus, that I can see the edges of my page. And then I'm going to start to draw what the ground should look like. So we'll go right about like that. If you feel like you're running out of space with your mouse, you can always come back and go around, and then that'll enclose that area. Then you can come back and add by holding down the Shift key. You can keep going with a new selection.
I was just curious with the multiply command. Does that actually just sort of make each scene one block sort of?
So what the multiply command is it's the blending mode on that layer. So it's controlling how the transparency occurs on that layer. And what the multiply blending mode does is it makes things that are white transparent, and it makes things that are dark darker. So it lets the darker shine through. And so in our exports, the background was always white. So using the multiply basically makes the background, the white, become transparent so we can see through it to the layer below.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
No problem. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift. Yep.
It makes the dark darker, but there wasn't anything other than that layer that brought in the darkness. I don't understand.
Yes. So what it does, yes, it makes the darks darker if we were looking at a photograph. But when we're looking at this, the only thing that we have that's dark are the lines and the shadows themselves. So those are all darker than what is white. Therefore, those show up through the transparency. Because if we start with, this was my original layer. So the only thing that would come through on top, right, when I turn, this is the next layer right there. When I turn that shadows into multiply, and again, it's 50% because I adjusted the opacity, but only the shadows are going to come through. The background becomes completely transparent, just the shadows. And it might be easier to see if I turned this back to the opacity, right? So there we are with our opacity at 100%. When it switches to multiply, the white areas become transparent and the black shadows show through. So there it is with the lines on it.
Okay, so the shadows become darker in a photograph, but in this they just appear.
They just appear, exactly. Okay. Exactly, because this is a line drawing that we've created versus a photograph.
Okay.
And so you know, the colored version here may be a good example as well, because the color is we're seeing the color in the multiply, but any area in this, let me turn these off for just a second, any area that's white stays transparent. So the colors are now appearing in the background when I turn this one on, but oops, wrong one, sorry, but the white areas are staying transparent. Not that it really matters because they're white, but that's the idea of the blending mode. It saves us from having to cut out the shape.
Oh, okay.
That's the advantage. We could instead cut out the shape, but by switching to the multiply blending mode, we don't have to. Let me change those shadows down. They're too dark. So I'm dropping the shadows down so they're not quite so dark. Okay. So I went ahead with that regular lasso tool and I drew in the ground. And it looks like I missed the building just there a little bit. Let me go back to my lasso tool. I'm going to hold down Shift to add to the selection, and we'll come in here right like that. The key is that I want to make sure that I'm completely covering the bottom of the building. Okay, so let me switch so that I'm on the ground layer, and then I'm going to actually paint using the paintbrush here with black. I'm going to paint in this area that I just made the selection. It would take me forever to paint like that, so I'll make my brush size bigger. I'm using the bracket key to make it nice and big. Alternatively, I could come up to the brushes and just slide the slider up. And again, the advantage of making it big is that I can fill this in rather quickly. Perfect. So I've filled that in. That then gives me ground. This takes the place of that dark ground line that we were showing on the elevation view in AutoCAD. So we're giving us a nice ground. To me, this is still showing up a little bit plain. And so I would love to, instead of leaving it like this, I'd love to add a little bit of grass on it. And I think that would look really nice. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. And we did this way back in exercise 107 or 8. I think it was 108. And I'm going to use the grass brush for this. It's not loaded by default, so we're going to load up the legacy brushes. There it is. And then we'll look under our legacy brushes, under the default brushes, and it's about halfway down. And there it is. There's my grass brush. So again, I'm using the clone stamp and I'm using the grass brush. And when I pick that grass brush, I need to copy from. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key to choose where to copy from. Right there. And then when I go to create the grass, I'm going to add the grass right along that edge. This looks to be about the right length. Oops, I ran out of space. Let me copy from there. So we can fill that in. We'll copy from right here. And the key is that we're just trying to make the edge a little bit softer. All right, I'm going to press Control Plus to zoom in here. Oops, that was Option Plus, not Control Plus. I'll use Spacebar to pan. It helps if I actually hold down Spacebar. There we go. And then we'll keep cruising along here. And filling in that grass. I'm going to stop right there at the path, presuming that there would be a path there. And then I'll move myself over to the other side. And I'll pick up where I left off. All right. And now I have that grass. So if we look at it as a whole, I'll press Control 0. Control 0. There we go. Instead of having this sit just floating in space or having a dark line below it, what I've done is I've added some ground to give it context. And you can already see this starts to live. It starts to ground this building and give it the context of a particular scene. So I've added that little piece in. Now, if you really don't like the black, we can make modifications to that. We can put an adjustment layer on the ground. With a levels adjustment, we can skew it to be like a gray or a white or whatever. So I'll show you some options as we go a little bit later on if the black is too stark for you. There's no harm in fixing that. The other thing that you might find, if I zoom in here, is that maybe that path should be a little bit more straight where I'm walking in. So we could go ahead and we could use a rectangle here and we could fill in that so that it became a little bit more path-like. Let me use the paintbrush here and we can just fill that in like that. and that can go away as if it were a path that somebody was walking on, for example. Let me press Control-0 to zoom out, and there we are. So thus far, I have my elevation, I have my ground. Now let's start thinking about how we could collage in some context for this. And this is always kind of like when we were in the Illustrator after AutoCAD, we're deciding how much is too much, how much is enough, what is it, what do we want it to look like, what shows well. So I'm going to start with a background. And so the first thing I need to do is I need to find a background image. I'm going to go ahead and click on the new tab here, and we'll go to Google Images. Actually, I'm going to do a Creative Commons search. So let's search.creativecommons.org. There we go. I'm going to look up Yosemite Meadow. There we go. Perfect. And so any one of these images might work really nicely to give me some background context. This one, for example, that's a little bit low. Let's look, maybe this one. Yeah, I like this one. Let's see if we can get the image. Perfect. So I like this one a lot. Let's go ahead and download that. I'll click the little download icon, and I want to download it in its original size. Ooh, that's not a very good resolution. Remember, we were at 6,000, so 1,600 isn't very good. I might go back and look again. See if we can find a better one. Yeah, that's better. And we'll download this. Obviously, if we were going to the site to do a site visit, we'd have our own picture of exactly what the site would look like. And so sometimes you take kind of potluck here and you decide, and we're going based on what we can find. That one might be okay. I'm not overly concerned with sunlight settings because we're not trying to match up my particular scene. So any one of these would work out okay. So we'll try that one that I just downloaded. Let's move it to my flash drive. So let's show it in its folder. Let's go ahead and copy it. And let me put it in my folder. Let's go ahead and paste it. There we go. And then we're going to bring it into Photoshop. So let me press Control- to zoom out just a little bit. And we'll go to File and then Place Embedded. And we're going to look for that background image. Now, when we start to think about aligning this and getting it to line up here, it may be helpful to temporarily change the opacity of this so that we can start to adjust. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. And I do want to think about where this should fall at ground level. So for example, are we looking up at this hill? Or are we looking down at this hill? I'm going to go ahead and drop it down just a little bit more. I'm using the arrow keys to kind of help me determine where it should be. And maybe it's about like that. Yeah, I think I like that. And then we'll go ahead and increase the opacity, right, like that. And then we'll commit to this as a size. Now, obviously, so far, we don't have, this is on the very top of the layer stack. So let's drop it below the ground. And there we go. Now we're seeing the background sky, but our building's not here. So we need to mask off where our building would be. So to create that mask, I'm going to go all the way back to my original layer right here. Sometimes people like to use the color version here because this can really help, because you could do a color selection. So I could go to select and then color range, and I could choose everything that is in this blue color really easily. So that's just a strategy. I'm going to go ahead and select that, but I'm also going to select down here. So I'm going to hold down, I'm going to use the magic wand tool right here. I'm going to hold down Shift and select that as, whoops, I need to be on the color. There you go. There we go. So now I've selected that. So I made sure that the transparent parts were selected and the background selected. Then I can come up onto my photograph right here. and I can click on the add layer mask. And that's going to cut out for my building. We turn back off the color, turn back on the ground, and we can turn on the rest of these like that. And now we're starting to see my building in its context. This context is still a little bit stark for me, so I might do some modifications to it. One, I might adjust the opacity down to let my drawing read some more. Maybe I'll convert this background image into black and white. Maybe that would look better. So this is, again, an example where Photoshop, you try things to see what looks right. So I'm going to go ahead and add an adjustment layer. I'm going to go up to layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm going to do a channel mixer. We'll call this black and white. There we go. I'll go ahead and say okay. And I want this to apply just to the layer directly below it. And I'll do that by pressing Control-Alt-G or going, to layer, create clipping mask. And now my changes on the black and white layer will only apply to my background image. So let's go ahead and adjust that. Remember, we can do that by checking this little monochrome, and then we can go through what our custom presets would be. So we could try the infrared, we could try the red filter, the blue filter, etc., until you find what looks right. So again, this is just another example where I'm trying that background and deciding whether I like it in color or whether I like it in black and white. Maybe the opacity is still a little bit strong. Maybe it needs to be a little bit less. The key here is that we want our building to be the part that really shines through. So maybe it's about like that. So you can see we're starting to develop, we're starting to build this up, we're starting to show our building. And maybe at this point, even my shadows should be a little bit stronger. And again, this is our strategy where we're tweaking and we're working through it. So maybe I want to show all of my windows in blue. So let's go ahead and let's use our lines layer right here. And I'm going to go ahead and use the magic wand tool to select all of my windows. I'm going to hold down Shift and select my windows.
Daddy,
Right like that.
Daddy.
You guys, hold on one second.
Oh, both the gate.
Sorry, guys, this is Thanksgiving break when my children are at home. So I need to take just a quick second and corral a few things. So give me a couple minutes and I'll be right back. All right, let's try that one again. Sorry. It's Thanksgiving break, apparently. Okay, so we're back here and we're going to try to select all of those windows. So again, I'm using the magic wand tool to do this. And I have the magic wand tool. I'm holding down Shift while I click, and I'm going to go through, oops, and select all of my windows. And I'm doing this on the lines layer because I think that's the easiest place to select them. The alternative would be to turn on the colored output. There we go. The alternative would be to turn on the colors and to do a color selection. The only problem I have is that these two windows are slightly different colors than the rest. So it's just different strategies. I'm going to go ahead and turn those off. And now we're going to work on these to actually like fill them in. So I could do a new layer right here, and I could choose to paint with some kind of a light blue, maybe like that. And I could paint all of those windows in, for example. And so now if we were to turn back on the ground and the background, let's make it black and white. We turn the rest of these on except for the color. And then we could start to see those windows. For me, that's still not, it's not the right tone of blue, that's for sure. It's definitely turning out to be too dark. Let's go a little bit lighter. And we could paint those in like that if we wanted to. I think it would probably look a little bit better if we used an image as a background instead. So let's go find an image of a sky. So let's come right here and we can look for cloudy sky. for example. And so, I don't like that one. Let's go back to sky. I have a bunch on my flash drive that I've already saved. It could be something as simple as something like this, which is kind of a deep blue. Let's go ahead and get that image. And let's download it in its full resolution. There it is. Let's go ahead and show it. I'm going to copy it. And we'll put it into our folder for today. And we'll go ahead and paste it. There we go. And then we can bring that one in. So let me go to File and then Place, Embedded. And we'll pick that sky background right there. I need to make it bigger. Let's make sure we're covering it up there. And let's pull this up. Obviously, we don't want to see any of those buildings on the horizon. So we'll make sure that those are hidden. It's right about like that. And we can use that set of windows right here as a mask for this layer. So it might be easier actually to just go ahead and select all those windows again. So I'll use my lines layer to do it. I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of these windows. Right, like that. And then we'll be on this layer. And once again, we will click on the select layer mask and it'll cut those out for their windows. So that's just another strategy. And again, we could take that and we could adjust the opacity down a little bit so that it's not overpowering, but it just gives a little bit of tint on what those windows might look like. So again, all of these are optional. So you can see we're starting to develop what looks good. Now, I told you earlier that there was a point at which I might try the ground as being white instead of as being black. Remember, we can do that by just adding an adjustment layer on top of the ground layer. So let me go up to my layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm again going to use a levels adjustment here. And then I will tie it just to the ground. So it's Control-Alt-G or layer, create clipping mask. There it is. And then with that levels layer, I'm actually going to change the color. Oh, come on. Is it not working? I love it when things don't do what they're supposed to do. It's not changing at all. There it is. Wrong slider. Okay, so there, it's messing with the wrong slider. It's this one. I can change it to gray, or I can change it all the way to white. And maybe that looks like too much snow. Maybe I like it in black, but this is our example to actually be able to play around with it and start to see what looks good and what doesn't. I think I'm going to leave it as black. I think it looks a little bit better there. So I've gone through and I've done a background. I've done all the windows. Maybe I want to collage some materials onto this building. Well, I can do that. This was designed to be kind of a concrete building, so I could go ahead and collage some concrete in. I would need an image of concrete. So I'd come back here and I'd look for concrete wall. And ideally, it would be a tiling texture. Right? And I could say, oh, I like this one. Let's go ahead and get the image. There it is. And I could go ahead and download it like that. And then once again, I'm going to copy it and save it. Now it's important that each time I'm moving these onto my flash drive, because if I wasn't moving them onto my flash drive, we'd end up losing them long term. So I want to make sure, sorry, I say flash drive, I mean my OneDrive. There it is. And let's bring that one in. So I'll go to File and then Place Embedded. There's my concrete. We could bring it in. This is obviously going to need to be smaller. So let's make it a little bit smaller here so it's big enough to cover my building. I like that. I'm going to commit to it. And then I'm going to copy it and paste it. So first off, let's rasterize the layer. I'll right click and say rasterize layer. There it is. And that's just so that it's embedded fully. And then I can go ahead and copy it, Control C, and then Control V, and I'll get a second version of it. And I could then move this so that those line up. I'm going to use the arrow key to make sure that they're touching. Control V again, that gives me the next one. Control V again, that gives me the next one. And it looks like I didn't quite cover my whole building. So let's see if we can't move that up to cover my whole building. Ah, it's a little bit small. So we'll have to just add one more piece right there. And then one more piece right there. Like that. So I've added that texture. Now it's a matter of combining all of these layers. So there's all the concrete that I have. I've clicked on the first one, held down Shift, clicked on the last one, and then I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to go to Merge Layers, and it's going to merge those into one, and I could rename this to be concrete. And then it's a matter of doing the same kind of masking. So let's turn everything off, except for my lines, and look at where we want that concrete to appear. I'll use my magic wand tool. I think that's the easiest, and we'll select, oops, I need to be on the lines layer, sorry. And we'll select the places where we want the concrete to appear. I'll hold down Shift, and we'll work our way through the parts of the building that should have the concrete on them. Maybe like that. Once I have that, I can go up to the concrete layer, turn it on, and then click on the Add Layer Mask. And now the concrete's been applied to that part of the layer as well. I'm actually going to move this down in the layer stack so that it's down here by the bottom, so that when I turn the rest of these on, oops. Except for that one and the color, right? We can see it with the concrete in the background. And again, that's just another strategy. So maybe this is too much, maybe it's not enough, maybe the background needs to be a little bit lighter, but this is our goal. This is our ultimate goal, is that we're trying to create this collaged elevation view. The last piece that I think is really, really important that a lot of times people forget in our elevation views is you need some kind of a person to represent scale. And that's where all those people that we cut out belong. So I'm going to go back and go to File and then Place Embedded. And I'm going to pick one of those people. Those are in my flash drive. I have people. And it would be really nice to see previews of these. But of course, Windows isn't going to do that for me. I'm going to use this one. We'll see what happens. I don't know. So there's the person. I need to adjust her scale. So we'll keep her in proportion, and we could place her right there. We need her feet to be at the right height. We need her to be at the right height. It's about there. And now you can see the person. And I chose to put her in black and white. The alternative would be to put her in as a silhouette. So I could do that going to File and then Place Embedded. And that was the gray right here. And we could drop that down. So I'll just show you these as two options, because remember, it's always about looking at it. And on that person, let's put her up on top of everything. Get her up here. And then I want to add an adjustment layer on her to switch her to black. So I'm going to go to my layer, new adjustment layer, and we're going to do a levels adjustment. There we go. And again, we're going to tie it to the woman walking gray layer. So I'm going to go to layer, create clipping mask, or Control-Alt-G on the keyboard. And then I can skew her to be black like that. And so that silhouette then could replace, if I wanted to, the girl walking like that. And so this becomes a matter of style. Would you rather see the person like that? Or would you rather see this person, move it up on top, where, you know, she's an actual photograph? It just becomes a matter of style. Okay, so I'm going to leave her as the silhouette because I think it kind of helps tie the ground together. And this gives us a sense of scale of how big this building really is. Okay, so when I'm all done, first thing I want to do is save my Photoshop file. I'll go to File and then Save. And we'll make sure it goes into my folder for today here. I hope. Yep. And we'll call this my elevation. And then we'll go ahead and click on Save. That's the Photoshop file. So I can come back and I can make edits to it after the fact. There we go. And then I'll do an export. So I'm going to go to File and then Export. There it is. Export as. And we can do it as a JPEG. So we'll go ahead and jump to a JPEG. For posting on Canvas, in the interest of size, we don't need it to be nearly this large. So we could drop it down maybe in half. We'll do it at 3,000. Oops. 3,000. There we go. All the rest of these options are okay. Let's bump the quality up. There we go. And then we'll go ahead and click on Export. And we could do dash final. And then we can go ahead and click on Save. And that then writes our elevation view. Okay, so this exercise is all about creating that elevation view. Remember, we're only doing one elevation view. So this is plenty. We don't need to do all 4 elevation views. And it's about creating a high quality output from SketchUp. How do we make something like this look really good from SketchUp? And that's really what this is fundamentally about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let people go. Remember, check-ins this week are optional. You should start working on your portfolio. That's kind of coming down the pipe really quickly. If you make a PDF version and you email it to me, grant@digitaltoolsforarchitects.com or gadams@dvc.edu. If you email it to me at either of those addresses, I'll do a red line version of it and send it back to you. I will have the lecture posted for Wednesday for you guys to watch. It's about portfolio covers. I'll have it posted for you to watch today. And then we'll have just check-ins on Wednesday. And again, those are optional and they'll be from 9 to 10:50. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving week. If you have little ones running around like I do, good luck. We'll survive somehow with their week off. But if you guys have questions, shoot me an email, shoot me a message in Canvas, and we'll go from there.